Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny. I'm here today to start my November reading wrap up. Whew. Okay, so the first book I finished in November is The King's Evil by Andrew Taylor. This is book 3 in the Marwood and Lovett historical mystery series. I have never been into a mystery series before. I am really into this one. I really like it. This book, I think it's all about characters for me. It's all about being able to follow the characters through their development and the enrichment, as they develop relationships, as they change as people. I just find it super interesting. So these books take place after the Great Fire in London in the 17th century. We're following James Marwood, who is kind of a disgraced man trying to make his way in the crazy politics of Charles II's England. And we're following Cat Lovett, who is also kind of disgraced. So they're these two kind of outsider characters, and they connect through circumstances beyond their control, and there's like a brewing romance there, but it's a super slow burn. And Kat is not your traditional woman of this time period, and so it's highly entertaining. I just find it really entertaining. The mysteries are not extreme, they aren't rushed. They happen in a not necessarily satisfying resolution, which I love because it's just it feels more real. It feels more plausible because these mysteries unfold in a way that is not about the prowess and the cleverness of our main protagonists' ability to solve the mystery, but rather their ability to navigate this very complex and layered society in which they find themselves, and also develop as characters and people. So I love that. And so I loved this book. I mean, going into the plot of these is kind of silly. The King's Evil is actually an illness, scrofula, that a lot of people are suffering from. The king is able to somehow touch them and make them better. I'm sure I could look into all these historical references if I wanted to, but I'm not that doesn't really matter to me. What's more important to me is the characters and what's happening to them in their lives. So I'll definitely be continuing on in the series. I think there are now 6 books in this series. So I'll probably try to read, hold myself back to only reading one a year. Although I think I read number 2 at the beginning of this year, and I'm reading number 3 at the end. So I might go faster, but I'll definitely go back to audio. This one was not available on audio at my library, so I read it in bound copy in the traditional way. I don't mind that. I enjoyed it, but I love listening to this story. It's just a great story to listen to, so I would probably go back to audio for number 4 whenever I get to it. All right, I'll check in again when I have finished another book. Hey, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to let you know that I am DNFing the Sparrow selected poems by A.F. Moritz. There's nothing inherently wrong with these poems. I've read some of them were nice to read, but there's nothing compelling me to keep reading this book. And because it's so thick and it's so comprehensive, I just thought, I'm just not into reading this right now. So I decided to just get it off my TBR, and that's it. I'm kind of indifferent to it. The poems are kind of all over the place because it's a compendium of A.F. Morris's work over many years. There's poems about nature, there's poems about political stuff, there's poems about philosophy, history, different things. So I think for me, something that I need to keep in mind for the future is that I don't really want to read these big compendiums of a poet's complete body of work. I'm more interested in smaller poetry collections that are themed. So, while I'm not going to finish this and it's a DNF, I also feel like it's a good way. Like, I like that in my poetry journey, I am figuring out what I like and what I don't like to read in poetry, and just like further distilling, the poets that's whose work I do want to pursue. So yeah, that is The Sparrow by A.F. Moritz. But again, not bad poetry, just not what I'm looking for in this moment. Hey everyone. So last night I finished The Secret Life of Sunflowers by Marta Molnar. And this is it's a novel about Johanna Bonger, who was the wife of Theo van Gogh, who was Vincent van Gogh's brother. And so both Vincent and Theo had very short lives. Theo died not very long after Vincent did. He also was mentally unstable. And so Johanna was left, with a young child and a whole lot of paintings. And so this is her story of how she became Vincent van Gogh's champion, and she kept pushing to get his work in the public eye. And it's also the story of Emsley. And this is contemporary fiction, and I guess the author usually writes as Dana Martin and usually writes genre fiction, so she doesn't really write historical fiction, and she felt the story needed a contemporary counterpart, and I don't really agree with that. I feel like this book had a lot happening in a short period of time, and it was a bit all over the place for me. I don't think the writing style was, it's not a typical book that I would read. It was very easy to read, but it didn't hold together for me in the way that I like fiction to be, with a level of complexity. There was kind of a fictitious diary that was put together sort of in the story, and I struggled a bit with the period of the time period that she chose to write about, how she picked out, from when Johanna first met Theo to when she first got Van Gogh into a show in Amsterdam. And that was kind of the period for Johanna. And then with Emsley, it's a really quick period of about a few weeks after the death of her grandmother, who's also an artist. So, I think overall I'm glad I read it, because it was at times an interesting distraction. But overall, this is not a writing style, or the topic was not handled in a way that I felt gave justice to Johanna. And it was supposed to be about being a strong woman and persevering through adversity. That was basically the theme. And while I think that's a really great theme, for me, the execution was just not enough. Not enough depth, not enough finesse in the writing for me. So yeah, that is The Secret Life of Sunflowers by Marta Molnar, and I will check in again when I have finished another book. Hi everybody. So I just wanted to let you know that I've DNF'd The Ladies of Grace, Adieu, and Other Stories by Susanna Clarke. So I'm like I said, when I put this book in my TBR for the month, I don't really remember where I heard this book recommended. I'm pretty sure it was a booktuber who recommended it, but I can't remember who. And so when I read it, the first story is the title story. The text is written in a very, like, hearkening back to an old style where they've changed the spelling of words. And I understand she was doing that to kind of get you to read in a certain cadence. But I actually didn't enjoy that challenge at this time. It was just like working to understand the accent that I was trying to read and working to understand the word that they were trying to say in a different spelling was feeling just like too much for me right now. And I also found that the stories, they've got kind of like a fairy tale-esque-ness to them. And I just was like, not really in the mood for that. So they didn't pull me. I read the whole of the first story, and then I started reading the second story, and I just wasn't feeling pulled in. I will say this is a lovely edition of this book. Like, I love this cover, and there's beautiful illustrations in the book. Like each title page of the stories are illustrated, and then each story also has at least, I think, one illustration included in it, and they're beautiful. So the illustrations are really nice. But I just didn't feel compelled to keep reading these. And I guess I'm getting a little bit fussier as I'm getting to the end of the year here with my TBR. And I also feel like I need to do a big purge of my library TBR list, because I think that a lot of the books that are on this list are books that I put on there years ago. I don't remember why I put them on there, and I'm just starting to be, maybe my reading tastes are changing. So I think this is actually, reading through this and deciding to DNF it has kind of inspired a reading project for 2025, which I will share at a later date. Because I think that there's probably a lot more books on my library TBR that are going to fall into this category. And I think I need to do a good purge of those and kind of like take them out, read a little bit, maybe try a chapter, that type of thing, where I, see what's going on. Because I think that these books just sitting there languishing on my library TBR for years is causing me to not even realize why I put them on there in the first place. And then I get them and then I'm like, why? I don't even like this book. And this one has been on my TBR for years, like probably 5 years, a really long time. So it's just sitting there. And the reason I put it on there is lost to me. So just some thoughts about that, but a second DNF for November. So I hardly DNF'd anything all year, and now I've DNF'd 2 books, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay. I'll check in again when I finish another book. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I finished my last 2 books of November, and I wanted to wrap them up for you here. They are my Bloomsbury Diaries books. So The Hours by Michael Cunningham and Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. So I listened to Mrs. Dalloway on audio. I really liked Juliet Stevenson's narration. I thought it brought the story to life in the perfect way for me. And I really liked The Hours as well. So because I'm going to make other videos about these books, I'm not going to go on about them too much here. Although to say that my videos about these other 2 books may take a while to come out, so I will let you know my thoughts in general. If you're not familiar with The Hours, this book is an homage to Mrs. Dalloway. It is tied into the novel Mrs. Dalloway in so many different facets. You're following Virginia Woolf on one day of her life in 1923 as she is coming up with the basic plot and characterization for Mrs. Dalloway. You're following Clarissa, whose relationship with Richard is tied into this idea of him calling her Mrs. Dalloway and their relationship. And you're following Laura Brown. And I won't, in case you haven't seen this, I'm not going to divulge all the connections, because I think one of the beauties of this story is the connections that are evolving and you don't actually understand how everyone is connected until near the end. Because I'd already seen the film, I knew the connections, which I think made the story just as rich, but maybe didn't have the same kind of impact in that ending scene as it would have if I wouldn't have known the connections. This novel covers a topic that I find really interesting in literature, and that is the idea of the bad mother. So that is a topic that is explored in here in a very succinct way. This is not a long novel. I think this novel for me could have been another 100 pages, probably. I could have stayed with these characters longer. But I understand what Michael Cunningham was trying to do. This also takes place in the course of one day. So you get a glimpse of one day. You get, backstory filled in through the internal thoughts of the characters. I loved reading this book in tandem with Mrs. Dalloway because you see how Cunningham understood Mrs. Dalloway and wanted to take a lot of the plot and a lot of the characterization, modernize it in some ways, put it on its head in other ways, a new city, a new era, a new group of people, but keeping a lot of the same ideas of time and how time impacts people as the main themes. Mrs. Dalloway it's so interesting. I read Mrs. Dalloway after seeing the film of the Hours, and I really didn't like it. I read it in hard copy, and I think I was just too young and too lacking in a certain ability to grasp Virginia Woolf's style. That's probably the first Virginia Woolf novel I ever read to get it. And I totally got it this time. I liked it way more this time. And I think it is a really brilliant novel. And for me, it reinforces to me that I need to listen to certain types of novels. So I think the next Virginia Woolf novel I listen to, or I read, I think I'm going to listen to it as well. I have read Orlando in a hard copy. And I think that listening to Juliet Stevenson read it helped me to differentiate the characters, helped me to hear the intonations and the tone of the thoughts processes, because one thing about Virginia Woolf's work is she's very stream of consciousness in her writing, not as much with Mrs. Dalloway as I think in some of her later work, which I still haven't explored, but stream of consciousness, when it's read to you by a narrator, can make more sense because you're understanding it through the narrator differentiating the voices a bit, which really helped me with Mrs. Dalloway. And I really appreciated the experience of reading these books together. I think they complement each other. I mean, obviously there are even excerpts of Mrs. Dalloway in the Hours, but there's just such a complementary feeling to them. And it was amazing to listen to things and then hear how the plot in this book was echoing that plot, which characters the names were being reused. It was just very clever. And yeah, I think this was very deserving of winning the Pulitzer Prize. It's It's a stunning book. It does have a very high rating on Goodreads, which I found bizarre. It's only 3.95. I mean, maybe some people consider that high. To me, it should be over a 4. But I guess I guess my love of Virginia Woolf, my connection that I feel to her, maybe would make me be more absorbed by this than other people. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think this book just covers so many things. There's tragic subject matter. There is, it's a meditation on the passing of time and the ordinary days in our lives and how they can grate on us and how they can wear on us. And so it's a really interesting interpretation, I think, of that. And I definitely think I'll reread this in the future. I think there's definitely things you can get out of it. And it's not a long book, so you can really feel absorbed by it again and not feel like you're entering into this huge epic tome that you have to, slog through. Like it's a really succinct, really well done book. Okay, so those are my thoughts on Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf and The Hours by Michael Cunningham. Like I said, there will be a Bloomsbury Diaries video that will come out about these 2 books and my experience reading them together. Eventually, I just put out the Virginia Woolf's diary, Bloomsbury Diaries, a few weeks ago, so I don't think I'm gonna do it. It'll definitely be into next year before I put out another one. But I am happy that I'm reading these books a little bit more quickly now, and therefore, hopefully next year there'll be at least 2 sets of Bloomsbury Diary videos. So thank you so much for watching. I will be back again soon with another video.